Welcome back to Talk Jamaica, streaming live on talkjamaicaradio.com. My name is Sanjay Lewis.
Good afternoon again, listeners. Good afternoon, Sanjay. My name is Ralston Chamberlain. It's now time for our discussion segment. The issue of crime and crime fighting continues to be a major challenge in Jamaica. 2014 saw a 16% reduction in murders. That translates to 200 fewer persons being killed. The year ended with rape, shooting, and aggravated assault declining by 17%, and also crimes such as break-ins, larceny, and robbery also declining by approximately 12% between January and November last year, compared with the corresponding period in 2013. More than 600 lottery scamming arrests were made last year under a new law that was passed, but there is much more to be done. In the first 6 days of 2015, we had 21 persons murdered. Listeners, joining us to tell us more, we have online Minister of National Security, Peter Bunting. Minister, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
All right, let me jump in right away at this, Minister. Opposition spokesman Derek Smith says that while we welcome the reduction in crime, and it is a good thing, it's nothing to celebrate considering that you have inherited a downward trend from 2000 on to this.
Well, I think the fact that we had over up this way, we had 300 plus fewer persons losing their lives violently in 2014 versus 2013 is something that I think we should legitimately celebrate. I don't make any apology for that. Having said that, does that mean that we're where we need to be? Ultimately, of course not. We're coming from a very high base. But nobody, or put it this way, nobody who understands the challenges we're facing would expect that that is going to happen from one year to another. So if you can make very substantial double-digit progress in a particular year, I think it's definitely something that you can pause to acknowledge as very significant, even while you understand that there's a long way to go.
But would you agree then, Minister, that it's not so much that he is criticizing, but rather saying that acknowledgement should be made of the work of the previous administration?
Well, I mean, this administration has been in office for 3 years. So when you're talking about a movement in year 3, I don't think it's incumbent to go back 4 years or 5 years to look at what was done by the previous administration. I mean, if we're coming up to an election and you're campaigning, and then you're going to start comparing your term in office versus the previous one. But I don't think it's necessarily to be constantly doing that. There was a reduction immediately after the May 2010 Tivoli operation, but that reduction, quite frankly, was going to be difficult to sustain on the basis of the strategies that were being used. And in fact, if you look at a quarter-by-quarter reduction, by the second quarter of 2011, the trend had been reversed and was actually once again increasing towards the end of 2011. By the last quarter of 2011, we had over 300 murders in that quarter. So it had started trending up once again.
Right.
So, I mean, Mr. Smith, I think he's very much an old school politician. He figures he always has to find a way to tear down any success that's made. I don't want to get caught up in that. I'm really looking forward.
All right, let me jump past that, Minister. I hear the commissioner saying that they'll be releasing the crime stats less because there seems to be a spike whenever they announce a downward trend. And as we mentioned in the intro, we already had 21 murders in 6 days. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, again, there's those who are just so anxious to try and throw cold water on the 2014 results that they will look on a few days and be, shouting the alarm and almost gloating. The truth of the matter is that as recently as November last year, we've had weeks with 29 murders, as opposed to 24 or 25. So there is a certain randomness in the crime statistics that you are always going to get, even while the long-term trend is downward. You will get week-to-week fluctuations that will give you good weeks and bad weeks. But it is hardly, something to panic about after only a few days. In fact, up till 6 a.m. this morning, we're averaging less than 3 per day. So it's coming back already to the average of last year, which was about 2.7, and it's at 2.9 now. And I expect that, as we get more data points over the course of the weeks to come, we need not be alarmed about what we saw in the first week.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pick up on the whole issue of alarm, Minister, for the beginning of the year, because indeed us in media, whether mainstream media or online media, have a role to play in how we put this information out there. Would you then agree with me that maybe mainstream media and other sources are making out the figures as alarming, are more alarming than they actually are?
Yes, that was my point. But let me say this. The opposition certainly has a vested interest, and so many of the comments in new media seem to be heavily invested in doom and gloom. And they're anxious to seize defeat from every advance, to see, to find some way to pick at and tear down even positive things that are happening. It's one of the challenges we're going to have is to change that paradigm. I sometimes think we've almost put ourselves into a sort of national depression, that we can't even recognize when positive things are happening. And I'm not being a Pollyanna. I'm realistic. I know there's a lot of things that need to be called out. There are not a lot of things that need to be denounced. There are not things that we need to be concerned about. But it can't be just this steady diet of negativity being, forced down our throats daily.
Minister, what would you say, is that factor that cause crime to reduce? I read about Operation Surge, which is a joint operation between the police and soldiers. Did this contribute heavily to it, to the reduction?
Well, that is one factor contributing, but I don't want to overemphasize that. At Surge took place only in November and December, and we've been seeing the downward trend all year. There are a number of things that contributed. I would like to believe that one has been this sort of shift in the paradigm of policing to one that is much more partnership oriented. We spent a lot of time in 2014, under the umbrella of Unite for Change, going into many inner city communities, having peace marches, having various rallies, six-a-side competitions, trying to build relationships of trust between police and citizens in these communities. I think that is one contributing factor. I believe the fact that we, deprioritize arresting people for minor offenses such as possession of small quantities of ganja, as the administration's policy has played out in that regard. We arrested 5,000 plus fewer persons for minor offenses, and in particular possession of small quantities of ganja during this year. Now, I don't know if you understand what is involved in arresting somebody and giving them bail,
Right.
but it's hours of police time. And therefore, if you had 5,000 fewer arrests, 5,000 plus fewer arrests, that translates to tens of thousands of police man-hours, which could then be focused on the violence producers, focused on patrolling the hotspots, giving really priorities to what is the most serious crime. And I think that would have been a contributor as well. The merger of the ISTF and the JCF would have eliminated a lot of administrative positions, which would again have allowed us to have more boots on the ground out there in the field. So I think, the combination of a number of things, the legislative initiatives you mentioned, both the anti-lottery scam and the anti-gang legislation, those would also have contributed.
I hear you mention the merger with the ISCF and the JCF. Is that process now completed?
Yes, man, that process is long completed.
And everybody is happy, because I know that there, persons had some issues when you first made the announcement and you had meetings with various groups, etc.
The only significant group that I think felt that they might have been losers in the process was the executive members, or some of the executive members of the ISTF Association.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that's the in quotation, the union for the ISTF members, the association, and they were essentially full-time persons in that job, not doing policing work, and they essentially would then have to go back out on the street, and some particular benefits that were associated with that, I think they were concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
So we got past that, and we've moved on.
Right. I hear also the commissioner mentioned, I saw it in one of the papers, that there may be a possible merger of the organized OCID, the flying squad, and aspects of the transnational crime and narco division, and that will form a new unit. And then when I read that, Minister, I wondered, wouldn't this unit that they're proposing do the very same thing that you created MOCA to do?
No, and let me tell you why. The remit of OCID is much broader than of MOCA. MOCA really just looks at those apex criminals and their facilitators. So, whereas OCID in any given year hundreds, if not thousands, of offences, and I'm speaking of OCID now as a combined OCID that, we're talking with flying squad, etc. MOCA would be looking at much fewer targets. Corrupt police officers, corrupt public officials, and the top violence producers, the top narcotics traffickers, the top lottery scammers. So, you're talking about a much more concentrated effort in terms of MOCA. These are the persons who have been perhaps operating with impunity for a long time that they're targeting.
Right. So, there are several police vehicles, Minister, and I jump in here, that are out of commission, right? Are there any plans to make police officers more accountable and maybe even start charging some for negligence? Because sometimes you're on the road and you watch how they handle these vehicles. Is there any system in place or plans to start charging?
Um, I know there is some years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, at least, there was an effort to ensure that there was a proper diary system for each vehicle to hold, drivers accountable. Whatever the condition of the vehicle, they would sign in for the vehicle that's taking over their shift and the condition of the vehicle and the handoff, and to the extent that the vehicles were abused, um, drivers would be held accountable. Having said that,
Mm-hmm.
the real problem that we have with JCS vehicles is that the fleet is just too old. About half of our vehicles are about 10 years or older. Now, if you go to any first world country, you would be hard pressed to find a 5-year-old vehicle in their fleet. Most of them usually aim to change the vehicles by the time they're 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We have just relatively few. I don't think we have 20% of our vehicles under 3 years old. And once you get much beyond 5 years, given that a police vehicle operates on 3 shifts, a 5-year-old police vehicle would be similar to a 15-year-old civilian vehicle in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the wear and tear and the
right.
mileage, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth of the matter is that we just need to invest over a sustained period in replacing a lot of the vehicles that we have now that are inefficient to continue.
But another point that was raised, I think it was early last year, Minister, is that there are so many different brands that you have within the fleet. So you will have some like Suzuki, then you will have Mitsubishi, have VW, and then there was a complaint from the mechanics who fix the vehicle that parts are hard to get, etc.
Well,
when they're making the orders, though, is there a comprehensive plan in place to say this is what we're ordering and parts, etc.?
The situation I inherited was that there were, and I'm going just from memory now, but I'm not off by more than one or two. The situation I inherited was that there were 29 different brands and about 130 different models of vehicles in the fleet when I became minister. We did a complete study of the fleet management and procurement, and we have now narrowed it down to only about 5 different model vehicles, or 6 different model vehicles that we purchased now. There are, I think, 2 models of 4x4 pickup. The car, 1 or 2 models of patrol car, and 1 or 2 models of the SUV. And we're standardizing the fleet around that. Of course, you have the legacy of our, those other vehicles which were in the fleet, and it will take time to call those out. But that process is on our way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Minister, let me ask you, we on the issue of resources, because each year we hear of ministries' budget being cut. Do you plan to ask for more for your ministry from the Minister of Finance this year?
I always ask for more. How much will I get? That is, of course, going to be constrained by the, overall budget ceilings that we have to observe in order to meet the targets under the IMF program. But, ideally, we could use a lot more resources. We could use a lot more vehicles, a lot more equipment, more men and women. However, we have we're not going to get a whole lot more. The Minister of Finance recently said we didn't find a pot of gold. So we have to understand that then we'll want to be incremental improvements over the medium term. So we have to be more creative. We have to prioritize better. We have to use the vehicles in areas where they will have the highest impact. And we may have to increase the use of foot patrols because in some communities, foot patrols may be as effective or more effective than vehicle patrols. So we're going to have to use a combination of things, accepting the reality of fiscal constraints for the foreseeable future.
I hear you talk about getting creative, Minister. I just want to point this out to you. Just last week I was in Montego Bay, and I realized that the police, they were transporting some prisoners, and they were in the back of a pickup. They handcuffed them, and the police was sitting there. And I posted to Facebook, and quite a number of persons responded saying this should never happen because even though you're transporting them to court, everybody's innocent until proven otherwise. But the other question is, it's clear that there's a shortage of vehicles.
I'm not sure how you can ever avoid saying that you couldn't transport prisoners in the back of a pickup because you may very well have a patrol out in the field. They intercept either wanted men or persons in the course of committing a crime. If they arrest them on spot, they have to find a way to bring them back to the station. So I don't think you will be able to avoid having persons detained, transported in whatever the police vehicle that was doing the patrol at the time may be. I mean, as I said, if we had, unlimited resources, we'd have special prisoner transportation vehicles, specialized ones all the time. But that, is just not affordable for at present.
Minister, just this week in the news, we saw what could be concluded as a personal attack on the female commander of the St. Thomas Division by a councillor at the St. Thomas Parish Council meeting. What's your reaction to that? Because many are saying that start did not look too well, both for the council.
Well, I was interviewed on a radio station about it. I made it very clear that I thought it was inappropriate and unbecoming of the councillor to launch this personal and sexist attack on the female commanding officer. And it was particularly unwarranted, given that they were the top performing police division in terms of reductions in murders in 2014. And they did well in terms of reductions right across the board. So I did not hesitate to make it very clear that sort of behavior I don't think is at all appropriate, and in fact it is unbecoming of an elected official. It crossed lines as far as I'm concerned.
Minister, I'm getting the wrap-up signal, but I want to put this one in. The politics, St. Aubin Bartlett will be challenging you based on what we're hearing in central Manchester for the next election. Any concerns?
You're always going to have a challenge, huh?
Yes.
I've never had other than strong challengers, or strong opponents in elections. My first election was against the Right Honorable Hugh Lawson Shearer. My second election was against Sally Fortius when she had been deputy mayor for years and was a strong candidate in the parish, um, and I only had a couple months lead. And the last election was against David Walker, again a national figure who had enormous resources behind it. And, you know, I have prevailed in every case. So I don't underestimate any opponent, I take any opponent seriously. But I expect that, you know, they will get the same treatment as the previous opponents and they dispatched
Well,
into retirement.
we'll watch that one. Also, it is said that your success at this portfolio, that is national security, will propel you to bigger job, and that is the leader of the party and maybe and prime minister. Are you eyeing that
But
position in the future? I know there is no vacancy now, minister, but when there is one.
I don't encourage those discussions and I use the standard answer that I was advised by Minister Davis, my good friend,
Mhm.
who said when you're at boys camp, focus on doing well at boys camp. You know, don't be there thinking about how you're going to the Olympics. Get through boys camps first. And I have a portfolio now that I feel very passionate about. I think it is important and it requires my absolute concentration and commitment. And I don't distract myself from anything like that.
Mhm.
All right, Minister, the last one before you go, you would be aware of the act of terrorism that's taking place in France and elsewhere. Have you heard from our international partners any information or any concerns that we might have in Jamaica?
Well, I think we regard terrorism as what we call a tier 2 threat, which means that the probability may not be high, but if it occurred, it would have a very negative impact. Therefore, we are vigilant and we monitor um, that area very closely. Some people may think we overreacted last year when we didn't entertain the president at all of Abu Bakr in Jamaica. I don't think people appreciate how dangerous these imams who can radicalize young men, often from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. So it is an area that we monitor. We try to be proactive. We share intelligence with all our international partners as well as with Interpol. And if we have any indication of an individual who may present a risk, we have capabilities that we can mobilize to respond to that.
All right, Minister of National Security Peter Bunting, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this discussion here on Talk Jamaica, and surely we'll be touching back base with you, as the year progresses to see how things are going. Thank you so much for being so candid in the discussion.
You're very welcome.